Hi, I'm Michael Smith with Nevada Trails, and tonight I'm with Rex Norman of the Forest Service. And Rex has actually probably the best job in the world, being out there in the outdoors and enjoying people and nature, and basically he's going to educate me on what the Forest Service is all about. And thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
And you're going to tell me all about the Forest Service.
Yeah, come here to see if I could provide a little bit of orientation to folks about the role and the function of the Forest Service up at Lake Tahoe in a very special and unique unit of the Forest Service called the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit.
That's a big area.
It's actually, as far as national forest areas go, it's actually very small. We're the smallest individual managed unit of the National Forest System. There's well over 150 national forests around the country, and most of them are millions of acres of size. The Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit, we manage around 165,000 acres.
Wow.
So there are districts or subdivisions of other national forests that are larger than the entire Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit. But although we're small, as far as national forest areas go, we have some pretty big jobs.
Well, as far as jobs rank, is Lake Tahoe one of the places you want to get a job at? Because I always hear about Colorado as being the job to go for when you're in the Forest Service, but isn't Lake Tahoe up there as well?
Well, it all depends on what you're looking for. As Forest Service employees, we might be attracted to the basin because of the work. We have some very unique roles in watershed restoration work and in fire management, habitat and species work. And, of course, the recreational opportunities are pretty great. Mm-hmm. The cost of living is high, so all depends on what you might be looking for.
Well, I also see a lot of things you guys do are quite serious. Do you guys do the control of burns around the lake as well?
Yes, we're one of several fire management agencies in the basin that are working to reduce fuel loading, to reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire, both to resources and to community areas. And prescribed fire is one of the tools that we use.
Well, this is going to sound kind of dumb, but I worked at Valhalla, cleaning Valhalla.
Mm-hmm.
You guys had this giant pile of wood,
mm-hmm.
and you'd burn it, and they'd be like someone getting married, and they have this giant smoke coming right through. And I was thinking, they're spending $600 an hour, and they got this cloud of smoke going through the wedding chapel.
Yeah, it's a little hard to time some of that when there's other stuff going on, but we do our best. But we have our role in fire management is one that has evolved with the story of the creation of the national forest lands in the Tahoe Basin over time, just as it has in other national forest areas. There's a map you can probably see behind me here, shows the Lake Tahoe Basin as it was in 1899.
1899.
And that was the beginnings of the Forest Service role up at Lake Tahoe. We had, beginning as far back as 1891, these places that were called forest reserves. They were originally run by the Interior Department.
Wow.
As sort of like little remnant areas of unlogged areas, and they were to be kept as sort of resource banks, you might say. And as time went on, about 1905, we saw the establishment of the U.S. Forest Service as our first forestry management agency in the federal government. And as time went on, national forests were being established around the country. And by 1963, most of the Tahoe Basin was private land, and some of it was national forest land. But it wasn't one national forest, it was three national forests. You had the Humboldt National Forest coming up out of Nevada. You had the El Dorado National Forest coming up out of the south. Mm-hmm. And then from the north and the northwest, the Tahoe National Forest. Now, all three of these national forests were managing lands for slightly different reasons. They were all still national forests, but they had different recreational interests, different watershed interests, and unified management of the lands of the basin was very, very difficult with three different national forests involved. And as time went on, by 1970, we realized that because of the development that was rapidly occurring from the 1950s, 60s, and into the 1970s, that a unified watershed management of the Tahoe Basin was going to be critical if we were going to be able to start reversing some of the damage that was occurring. And so administratively, in 1973, the Forest Service took the lands from those 3 national forests within the watershed boundary of the basin and established a place called the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit. Now, that was a temporary name until such time as they would come up with a more permanent name. Well, they never came up with a more permanent name. So we're still the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit, or LTBMU. And today, the Tahoe Basin, about 80%, a little less than 80% of the land base of the watershed area of the Tahoe Basin is managed by the U.S. Forest Service.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. Mm-hmm. Well, I see a lot of people who do a lot of entertainment, like the Zephyr Cove Stables. Mm-hmm. Aren't they like leasing property from the Forest Service? We
have several recreation providers that work with us as permit operations.
Snowmobile operators.
Zephyr Cove. They offer that resort facility there. They have the beaches. They have the recreational activities they provide. Another example is Camp Richardson.
Exactly.
Camp Richardson is another example. Another permanent operation is Heavenly Resort. And all of these are major recreation facilities and services that are provided in partnership and through permit with those recreation providers.
So do you have any real cool places that no one knows about that I could probably get a hold of?
Oh, of course, but I'm not going to tell you about it. No.
I thought I heard about a mansion that's available, but it's on the QT.
No, there's no mansions available. We have some historic structures.
Maybe that's what I'm talking about.
We have historic structures. Our best known historic structures are over at the Baldwin Estates and the Tallac area. Not too far from Camp Richardson. We're sort of unique in that way. And in fact, there's many, many unique aspects to the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit that you don't generally find at other national forest areas. Most national forest areas have some recreation facilities, visitor centers, and then just lots and lots of outdoors.
Oh, yeah.
We are a little unusual in that we actually have some historic facilities that we manage. You don't find that all that commonly in
boathouse. I absolutely love the boathouse. When I was taking care of the place, I'd open up the giant windows, and it was just heaven.
A lot of restoration at Tallac and Baldwin Estates and so forth in the last couple of years. It's a very, very popular location, and it captures a little early part of the Tahoe Basin's history when the Tahoe Basin wasn't known as like a world-class skiing destination or backcountry. It was a more genteel destination for well-to-do members of society, wealthy
the Great
people.
Gatsby type thing in the old days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. People that were involved in different captains of industry and so forth that created these little kingdoms that were up at Tahoe. And it really wasn't until the 1950s that the Tahoe Basin really started taking off as a recreation destination for your average citizen, and so much of that had to do with the establishment of things like the interstate highway system, railroad links to communities nearby, and the average middle class citizen now being able to take it on the road and go and see the country. And from that point on, the Tahoe Basin became a major recreation destination. And to give you some perspective of how many people come out and recreate in the Tahoe Basin, I mean, in just about all aspects of outdoor recreation, the Tahoe Basin is about 1/5 of the landmass area of Yosemite National Park. And yet, we get about the same amount of visitors, 3.8 to 4 million visitors every year.
That was actually my next question. There's so many people that come to your parks. And when I first moved here, I went to did a lot of bicycle riding around the Tallac area and through those parks. And you guys manage the parks as well, the beaches?
We have some beaches that we manage, yes.
And it was like, it seemed like area to area to area, there's just so many people, it was just amazing. And I just thought, for your job, it's just a lot of people to manage, plus keep the place pristine and beautiful. Like I was talking about the Seven Fest. There was a lot of people going through there.
Oh, yes. That's one of our most popular events that we do every year.
Well, I absolutely love the underground water area. What's the name for that area?
That's the Stream Profile Chamber. It was originally established back in the 1960s.
Absolutely brilliant. Whoever designed that and created that, just gave nature a good thing, and all the walkways and the bridges.
It's a marvelous interpretive facility. It's over at the Taylor Creek Visitor Center, which is on Highway 89, about 3 miles from Emerald Bay. And so it's a quick trip from South Lake Tahoe. And if you haven't had a chance to visit that, I would say definitely take that in.
Oh, yeah, that's my favorite if you're visiting Lake Tahoe. It's about a mile on the right-hand side past Camp Richardson.
Roughly about, close
Maybe
to a
little
mile.
less.
Just a little past Camp Richardson.
Do you get in trouble when you park on the
right.
street? I always park on the street. I was afraid I'm getting towed.
Just make sure you follow the parking signs.
I don't.
Okay.
But it's just closer to the little bridge and the walkway. And
Yeah.
when you're walking that area, the paths, they have markers. And you just read about the history of the fish and things of what's going on. And I just found it very educational.
Yeah, it's a place where you can really get a good opportunity throughout the summer to find out and learn about how ecosystems in the Tahoe Basin work.
Yeah.
How forests work, how wildlife works with watershed areas and riparian environments, and how all the wildlife and the forest areas are all quite interconnected into ecosystems.
That's exactly what I was learning. And you have a lot of young people. I guess they're are they there just for temporary jobs for the season? Or
We have quite a sizable seasonal workforce that works in just about every aspect of what we do. Ecosystem restoration work, interpretive services, fire management, just about all the large functions that we have a large and busy field season for. We have we about I think it's close to triple our workforce during the summer.
So if you're a young person right now and you want to get a job in the Forest Service, should you take any particular classes, or should you have any kind of criteria to be on the resume to get a job with you guys?
Well, most certainly your education is a real important factor. The better your education and the more applicable it is to the fields that the Forest Service has responsibilities for, the more education you can get early on, the better. And experience is very helpful. There's internship programs, there's summer employment opportunities. All of those things help you to build up experience.
Because I met a young man who was talking to me about the salmon. He came from Wisconsin with a degree in, I think, in biology. Thought that was pretty aggressive. His first job out of college.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's seasonal, but that was just one of the people I met going around. And another young man I met was doing it seasonally, and then right now he's at the ski resorts. I thought that was a great job, too. He was telling tourists how to look at the fish underwater, at the glass casing underwater. And see, I met some really sharp people, and probably about 20 people I talked to at Salmon Fest. And every one of them just was bubbly and glad to grab you, and maybe because I was older than 10.
Yeah.
It seemed like you had a lot of school buses going through there in the mornings, but I kept on coming back and back until they were done with the kids.
Yeah, we by the way, we do have a lot of education program opportunities that we have for our local schools.
Well, I thought that was fantastic.
Taylor Creek is one. We have one that's operating right now, which is called Winter Trek, which is a snowshoeing opportunity for kids up at the top of Heavenly.
I would love to get some pictures of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of great opportunities we have to get kids connected with the outdoors, because a lot of them are losing their connections with the outdoors.
Well, that's the name of the game, and that's why we're here. Well, Rex, we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we're going to show you some more pictures, and thank you.
You bet.
In order to protect our riding opportunities, we've got to tread lightly. That means staying on roads, trails, and areas designated for ATVs. Also, go over, not around trail obstacles to avoid widening trails. And cross rivers slowly, and only at places where the trail crosses the stream. Join the millions of responsible riders who protect our privileges and our natural resources by treading lightly in the outdoors. Visit Tread Lightly at treadlightly.org.
Hi, I'm Fish and Game Warden Patrick Foy. Boaters at Lake Tahoe should expect watercraft inspections at all launch sites around the lake. These inspections are designed to prevent the destructive spread of zebra and quagga mussels, as well as other aquatic invasive species. If brought into Lake Tahoe, invasive species will damage boats and the pristine waters and be impossible to remove. Remember to clean, drain, and dry your boat every time before entering a new body of water. Clean boats stop aquatic hitchhikers.
Hi, we're back with Rex Norman of the Forest Service, and we're going to talk a little bit about wildfires. And Tahoe's got a really weird history where the the forests were knocked down for the Virginia or mines, and then the forests are regrown and they're all kind of too thick. I guess in the old days, the horses used to be able to walk right through them. Now they're so thick you can't even really do it. It's just not a natural growth period.
There's a famous line from the writings of John Muir where he talked about one of the things he admired about the Sierra Nevada was that you could ride a horse in a straight line for a mile and never get your hat knocked off. And he actually wrote that in memory of riding a horse in the Lake Tahoe Basin.
Wow.
There was a lot of logging that was done during the Comstock mining area. Roughly about 60% of the Tahoe Basin's forests were subjected to some type of logging or another. It's often said that the Tahoe Basin, 60% of the forests were cut down. That's actually
60%?
That's actually not correct.
Oh, okay.
60% of the Tahoe Basin was subjected to one level of logging or another. Some areas did receive some very heavy clear cutting. And this changed the composition of many of the forest areas because what they were looking for was good usable timber. They were looking for stuff like sugar pine and ponderosa pine, Jeffrey pine to a certain degree as fuel, not so much firs because they weren't good for building material, they weren't as good as fuel, so the pines were the target. And so the composition of the forest in many areas was changed, not universally across the basin, but in many areas. And the forest that grew back was heavier with firs because the firs are quicker and more adaptable. They're also very shade tolerant, and whereas the pines are not. And so in many areas the composition of the forest was changed. The biggest factor, though, that has changed the way the forest operates in so many ways was the suppression of fire.
Suppression?
The suppression of fire. About 110 years ago, fire suppression began in the Tahoe Basin. And by the early 20th century, it was becoming professionalized. And as fire management agencies, the Forest Service and state agencies and so forth, we got really good at it. And there was a big demand for fire suppression to protect communities. And fire was largely viewed through most of the 20th century as being something that's just simply bad.
Well, I thought the Washoe tribes used to do it on purpose in the old days.
Yes, we do know that the Washoe tribe actively used a lot of fire, and that became part over time of a fire ecosystem. And lightning caused fires. Fires were very, very frequent. I'll give you an idea how frequent fire was. The lower elevation area of the basin surrounding, like a bathtub ring around the Tahoe Basin, had the most frequent fire return intervals. Now, what I mean by that is that take a typical stand of the forest down at those elevations.
Okay.
That area before settlement was experiencing fire as frequently as 5 years and as at the other end around 25 years. So between 5 and 25 years, fire was entering that forest ecosystem. And when fire is that frequent, what it gives you is, well, for lack of a better term, park-like forest, dominated by medium and larger sized trees, primarily pines, which are very fire tolerant, very low levels of fir trees, for example. Fire moves very slowly through that kind of an environment, doesn't have a chance to really catch very much. Crown fires were very rare. And the higher up you go in the Tahoe Basin's elevation, the fire frequency would become broader and wider over time.
So that's why my neighborhood in Aspinwall isn't that thick. But
yeah.
not too far from
right.
it. Heavenly is.
Yeah, as you go up, as you start going up into red fir environment, fire was less frequent, but it was still a frequent visitor in the long run. So with this level of fire activity, the forest actually became dependent on frequent low-intensity fire. When we took that away, we took away an important natural management. Now, we've learned a lot, especially since the 1960s and 1970s, which has created our ability to be able to reintroduce fire into that environment.
Wow.
However, you have to manage it, though. You can't just say, well, let's go in there and light some prescribed fires. It's too much fuel. Because with the lack of fire, the material has built up on the forest floor. The forests have become denser and denser and denser.
Exactly.
And what we might look on as being this dark sort of primeval forest is actually a forest which is in danger of catastrophic wildfire. It has diminished habitat. Its ability to function well as a watershed is diminished. And, well, as we saw from the Angora fire in the summer of, or I should say the late spring of 2007, that catastrophic wildfire is highly destructive, and we lost more than 250 homes in that fire.
That was very, very bad. I had some friends, my taxman's house burned down.
Yeah.
And I'm not changing the subject, but when I take boats around Lake Tahoe, they always talk about the beetles are create a lot of dead wood as well that causes some of these fires, or at least help the fires because there's a lot of dead wood? Or
it all kind of connects together. Back in the 80s and the 90s, we went through a drought phase, and as the trees were already weakened to begin with because they're competing with one another.
Yeah.
They're all competing for light and soil and water, and the denser the forests are, the more the competition, the more stress. And those trees, when they become stressed, they lose their ability to fight off disease. They can't fight off things like fungal infections and so forth that come through, different kinds of pathogens, and insects.
Well, I heard that some people are going around knocking off moth things or something for moths.
There's
moth homes, or I don't know if it's moths or caterpillars or something.
Our primary concern is a type of bark beetle that's up there.
Bark beetle, huh? Now,
these bark beetles are a natural part of the environment. They're there all the time. But when they all of a sudden get a large food source that's really close together of stressed trees, they get into the bark, they destroy the cambium layer underneath, the tree dies, and it becomes more fuel.
Okay.
And they move quickly from in these crowded environments, they move very, very quickly from one tree to another. Just like, let's say, a large rodent population that's very tightly packed together. Disease spreads quickly, works the same way with the trees, the bark beetles.
Wow.
And so in the 80s and 90s, following that drought cycle, we were left with a lot of dead trees, a lot of tree mortality. Now that tree mortality has largely been eliminated, but bark beetles are still there, and they still pose that threat in another drought cycle without some thinning work. And that
so
thinning work
you have to fight
tool.
the insects and the beetles, and then you have to go hire out people to thin your forest as well?
The thinning work is done by either our crews or contract crews, and they go in there and they remove the overage, the overburden of smaller diameter trees to get the composition of the forest back closer to its natural density. We have to do something with all that fuel, though. We have to do something with all that material. There's a lot of different ways you can deal with that, and one of the ways that we're increasingly dealing with that is through what's called biomassing, utilizing the woody debris for either for fuel, for power facilities, biomass generation.
Excellent.
For agricultural uses, agricultural bedding for erosion control can be chipped and turned. A lot of the stuff that you see along roadways and so forth for erosion control is chipped old forest fuels. But there's so much of it, though, that if you rely just on our ability to biomass it right now, you're talking about decades before you could get rid of the material. So we still are going to have to use for a while pile burning, which is a very quick, very efficient, and very immediate way of getting rid of those materials.
Unless you're getting married.
Unless you're getting married, that's right, yeah. Unless you're getting married. Yeah. I would recommend late summer because we don't do much.
Well, actually, that brings back to Valhalla. When I was there was like hundreds of young people. I don't know if they were with the Forest Service, but they were looked like they were getting trained on fire prevention, or a lot of them had shovels.
Yeah, that was probably a field day exercise for one of our basic wildland firefighter training courses.
So you work quite extensively, obviously, with the fire departments and young people to get them trained to.
Yeah, well, we offer a basic wildland firefighter training course every spring, and that course helps to train our on-call crews and give people opportunities to be able to get the training they need to be able to move into wildland firefighting full-time.
Well, I felt for them, but they had full equipment on, and it was hot out.
Oh yes, it's very, very brutal work. It's very brutal work.
That's why they're young people, I think.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
Did you want to talk any more about the invasive species? I don't know if we have time.
Yeah, invasive species is another issue that we're dealing with. Primarily, this deals a lot with different types of plant species. Being an urban forest area, we have a lot of opportunities for different kinds of invasive species to come in and become established in the Tahoe Basin, and these species tend to crowd out our native species. So that's becoming an increasing issue for us. And just like it always seems that all your problems are always increasing in magnitude every year. Recreation management, we were talking about some recreation opportunities and things. It's going to continue to be a big issue for us.
Well, I know in this show we run the what do you call it? The mussels, trying to get rid of the zebra mussels.
Zebra mussels,
for
quagga
the
mussels.
boats. And I just heard there's someone spending $200,000 to get rid of the clams.
Yes, there's several aquatic species that are becoming potential problems for aquatic habitats in the Tahoe Basin. So it's not just plants. We have aquatic species that are invasive as well, and then probably the biggest geographic job that we have is in our watershed restoration.
I was just going to say that when I was talking to one of your people, they were talking about. I was talking about wetlands because I think I just did a show about the Nature Conservancy.
Right.
And I was saying how great it is we're doing all this restoration. They said, well, we're doing it right here. I thought, fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things that affected Lake Tahoe. I don't know when it exactly was, but the Tahoe Keys, wasn't that built on wetlands?
Exactly, yes.
And,
it was built on a highly complex natural riparian watershed system. And that's probably the most obvious example of a human-altered wetlands and watershed area, but there's dozens and dozens of other ones. We're working in Blackwood Canyon,
Excellent.
up on the towards the Tahoe Cityway, in restoring that one, and there's many other areas there that what we're doing is we're taking a lot of the human alteration that occurred over the years, a lot of that damage that occurred, and begin to restore these areas into more functional watershed systems so that they have multiple resource benefits. It's not just for the habitat and for the forest health, but it's for water quality, it's for soil quality, it's for aquatic habitat, and that's a major job, and that's one of the biggest jobs that we've had since we were established back in 1973.
So as your job, you get to play around with all these areas at the same time.
Well,
you get to study it and get out there. You get out there.
I get to talk about it.
But you get to go see it though, right?
Yeah. But my job in public affairs is basically to do what I'm doing right now.
So you might have to take a kayak and go from your office to Tahoe City and back, and just studying the lake quality and things like that.
Oh, well, I'm not one of the scientists that does the monitoring, but I get to enjoy the benefits of the restoration just like everybody else does.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you had a chance to go out and really see it hands-on.
Once in a while. Gosh, I spend way too much of my time in the office.
They stick you in the office?
Yeah. I prior to coming to the Forest Service, I worked almost 20 years with the National Park Service. And I was in the field almost all the time there. So I do miss the field work, but every once in a while I do get a chance to go out and see it.
Well, you're very good at what you do, and it's very educational. And who's involved with training all these young people and doing all these is that your area as well?
Well, it's really the job of our departments. We bring in our new personnel, and they become oriented and trained in the work. Every area is completely different and unique, and so they take the background they have from their education and experience, get into the field work, and then start to work towards some of their specialties. We have a lot of ologists, hydrologists, and biologists.
Yes, I call it the IS people, but there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
But they're well trained and they're young and they're enthusiastic. And what I thought was so good about it will pass on to other kids. Well, I'm sorry, Rex, we're out of time.
Oh.
And
well, I'll come back sometime.
I hope you come back, and I need the education, and I hope the public gets it too, because I just have a blast doing it. And thank you for being on Nevada Trails.
You bet.
I appreciate it.